Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please come here, have a seat, come near. We will start with our discussion on space and mobility. Welcome. We want to speak about how space infrastructure and space know-how pave the way to future mobility systems. The panel will demonstrate the usefulness of space exploration for everyday applications, especially in the area of mobility. My name is Romy Arndt. I'm a news anchor from the German news channel NTV, and I will moderate this discussion. We will first talk here on stage for about 45 minutes, and after that, in the last 15 minutes, you are invited to ask your questions if you want. And now I want to introduce to you the participants, you know what I mean. Stefan Glocke, on the very left or right from your position, chairman of the advisory board at Volocopter. Welcome. Next to him, Andreas Hammer, head of electronic cluster and country executive for space systems at Airbus Defence and Space. On my right side, Professor Hans-Jörg Dittus, executive member for space research and technology at German Aerospace Center, DLR. And next to him, Marco Fuchs, CEO of OHB. Welcome. Gentlemen, we want to start with a short opening statement. Who wants to begin? Mr. Glocke?
Thank you, Romy. Do we have the film? I think, okay. In 2011, two German engineers discussed in an internet blog what they have to do to scale up a toy drone to make it man-carrying. And it was the first time that you had distributed electric systems in a man-carrying vehicle. And what you see is the famous first flight of the VC-1. After that, the three founders went to holiday. They put the video into the internet. And after one day, they had 1 million clicks. NASA was calling them, so everybody was coming out of holiday again. And so the story of Volocopter started. They then really thought of developing a real vehicle. So this was only for testing. It took time, by the way, interesting note for the audience. The budget was 70,000 euro, and it took them half a year to build this. And then it took us another 4 years to get a permission to fly as an ultralight vehicle. And you see here the famous first flight of the VC-200. The same vehicle was then further developed and did some autonomous test flights last year in Dubai. And we are now up for IAC certification, which we hope to achieve within the next 2.5 years.
Thank you. Mr. Hammer, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm using his microphone because mine is not working. So, as you know, Airbus is also working on systems which can autonomously fly, which are going to be used as taxis. We have the Vahana system, we have the City Airbus, we have Pop-Up Next. And since I believe that whatever we have seen in the past in science fictions is going to come true, I believe that it's time to use really the third dimension for our problems we have in the big cities. You probably know that in 2030, 5 billion people on this planet are going to live in cities. And everybody has already encountered a situation that you are sitting in your car in a traffic jam, you have just 200 meters to go and you are stuck. And everybody probably looked into the air and how easy it would be just to make a big jump. And this is exactly what we are doing. So Airbus is totally convinced that we are on the right track. The future is going to be that you use it really as a taxi. You have an application like Uber. You book it for yourself. You have similar prices. It's going to fly autonomously. But the biggest challenges to overcome is, of course, perception of the people living on the ground. You have to secure them, shouldn't be any danger. Traffic management issues, and of course you need to have a lot of information and space infrastructure to make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Hammer. And Professor Dittus.
Okay, I like to start with two statements or two theses. The first one is whenever we have autonomous traffic and transport in the future, we have to rely on very precise navigation systems. The second one is that these navigation systems might be based on satellite technology with some additions on terrestrial systems. And I'd like to give you two examples of that, what we have tested in the last years. And the first one is ship detection by AIS, signals from satellites, which is tested and well now by special antenna. You see here a small satellite system with a specific helix antenna so that we can focus also on regions where we have very dense ship traffic. On the other side, you see an automatic dependent surveillance broadcast system check by satellite where we record signals from planes. There's also a terrestrial system which we can observe from satellites in the future as well. But let me go to the most important project we have in space, which can help to come up with, or can help for future traffic, and that's of course whatever we do in GNSS systems. You see here, as an example, the European system Galileo, which gets more and more important here in Europe. And there we have to develop a lot of technologies to make it more robust, to get analysis for threat analysis, and also developments with respect to much more and enhanced communication systems, because whatever we see here needs exchange of very precise time signals. So we need optical communication systems and so on, and that's a field where we are working together with TSAT systems and many other companies as well. So that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dankeschön. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, the title of this session being Space and Mobility, of course, from my perspective, I continue where Hans-Jörg Dittus ended with Galileo. Galileo obviously is the big flagship program, satellite program, space program for improving the mobility. Of course, it is now in operation since late 2016. And everybody, all of us, are using it through smartphones, through cars, and it's moving on. I mean, we are developing another 12 satellites. They will be launched in the next years. The competition for the so-called batch 4, which is almost like the second generation, is ongoing. The first proposals have been delivered for that. It will be another competitive procurement process where from all over Europe participants will participate. So Europe is leading already in terms of the quality of the signals. Europe is leading in terms of the value for money. If you look at Galileo satellites, they cost about 40 million a piece. If you look at GPS satellites, they cost 300 something a piece. That is on a well track, and I think it shows now that when it was discussed many years ago, there was a lot of debate. Do we need this? Is it useful? And now, obviously, with the traffic situation we have, with the overall strategic and political situation that we have, I think it's very clear that it was a very good idea that Europe went into a known satellite navigation system. So that's, I think, very well underway. Of course, what is also underway is the utilization of space-based system on the ground in telematics and tracking and tracing, what you now call M2M, Internet of Things. We're doing this since many years. Our investment in Orbcom has more than 2.5 million users now on the ground. So this is an existing industry, and I think the space industry's contribution, or the space community's contribution, is well acknowledged, and it's just part of all-day life. So I think it's from now on to go on to new frontiers, as the one that we saw, and I was really impressed seeing that. And in the first image, I was thinking, well, I wouldn't dare to step into it, but the later one looked like something that is really something that everyday people will also give a try. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fuchs. Mr. Clocker, we have seen your product, the Volocopter. What's the difference between your product and a regular helicopter?
Oh, there are a lot of differences. First of all, we use 18 rotors instead of one, which makes the whole vehicle much safer than a helicopter, and also the noise emission is not comparable to a helicopter, which is extremely important if you have to target flying in a low altitude over cities. The noise emission is the critical point that you have to fulfill. Of course, safety too. Second, it's basically flying software. It was the first time that ever distributed electrical system were used in flight, regular flight. The whole Volocopter is extremely safe. You have total redundancy of every major component. Several motors can fail, several batteries can fail. So this is a complete new way of flying.
Which pain points do you solve for your users?
Pain point is like it was addressed. If you're stuck in traffic jam, if you need an hour for like 15 kilometers, then you would wish to sit in a helicopter or in a Volocopter in future or in a city Airbus. That's basically what the future will bring.
How important are the data generated by satellites for your project?
Oh, quite important, because if we imagine the future that not only Volocopters or city Airbus or manned vehicles will fly over cities, but also toy drones, cargo drones, and everything, you need a complete automated system. It doesn't work with air traffic control in the old-fashioned way. And if you still, I'm a pilot by myself, you fly over Germany and you see how it's still the navigation works, like 50 years ago. That's hard to imagine that this is the future. So what we need is a complete automated system on every altitude of airspace.
So the Volocopter could not fly without satellite navigation?
Of course it can, but if you want to have hundreds of Volocopters flying over a dense city, you better have one.
Thank you. Mr. Hammer, Airbus is also working in a comparable direction. What are your solutions for congested cities?
Actually, it's pretty much the same direction, because we both believe that this is going to be the future. But Airbus, of course, uses its expertise to make a kind of holistic approach to the problem. And as I said already before, the technological challenge to build an autonomous city taxi or Volocopter, it's great, but we can manage that. But that's just the half of the story. I think what was mentioned just a few seconds ago, the air traffic management combined with flying a taxi then in the future, bringing city planners together. You have to imagine we have an air traffic management system where you have corridors and airspaces and all that. Means you have to fly in this airspace. I used to be a pilot, even instrument pilot, so I know exactly what I'm saying. This is not going to be the concept of the future of the city taxis or air taxis we are going to have in the probably not near, but in the future, not in the near future, but in the future, you're going to have, like I said, you're calling your taxi, you find a kind of Volopad, CD Airbus pad somewhere. You have it already on your smartphone. You book with an application your taxi, and then you fly wherever you want to go. For this, you need to work together in the big ecosystems with smart city planners, with regulators, with air traffic managers, and make a kind of holistic approach. So Airbus is doing not only the system, but is trying to do also that, and they're working already together with the Commission. And I think actually there is no other chance than to do that, because if the population and the cities are growing like they have done over the past decades, there's no alternative. We have to do something in this area.
You build also satellites at Airbus. Are you planning to use your own infrastructure in the space for your solutions on Earth?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Marco said, the basis for everything is a navigation system. If you go for autonomous driving, autonomous flying, that's, as the legal guys they are saying, conditio sine qua non. So if you don't have this, there's nothing. But in addition, I do believe it's not good enough, because you need to have situational awareness, meaning you need to have a constant Earth observation in order to see congestions, in order to see thunderstorms and all that, because these these things are finally flying, right? And in addition, what you need are also telecommunication satellites, because you need, next to the navigation signals, you need to have an augmented reality by telecommunication infrastructure. I was visiting a company who is doing autonomous driving microchips, and they are, of course, they are using GPS data or Galileo data in the future, but what they also use is actually the drivers driving in front of them and behind of them, filling a cloud of information in order to augment more and more the picture actually the computer is seeing. So it's not good enough to see there's a street. What you need to see is the traffic on the street and maybe water on the street, or a tree which actually has come down because of a thunderstorm and is lying across the street, which you can't detect via a navigation system. So you need to have a lot of information, and for that you need to have space-based infrastructure, because that's everywhere. It fills all the gap you have with the terrestrial systems. So my thesis is that the biggest challenge in city Airbus flying and volocopter flying is actually if you fly not in a very dense area, because then you need to rely on other communication systems which you normally don't have, because it's kind of rural area. And in Germany, still in Germany, we do have rural areas where you don't have any broadband coverage.
Thank you, Mr. Hammer. Mr. Fuchs, your company, OHB, built the main part of the satellites for the European navigation system Galileo. What is the current status of Galileo? How many satellites are already placed into the orbit, and how many are coming, and how they are working?
Yes, in total there are 26 Galileo satellites up and working. The first 4 have been the validation satellites, and then 22 are of the so-called FOC, the operational constellation. Since then, there will be another 12 coming from this operational constellation, identical satellites as the 22. So at the end of the day, then we will have a total of 38 European Galileo satellites. But of course you need more satellites, first of all, to make the system robust, and of course all the satellites have a designed lifetime, so you need to make sure that when the old ones are getting old, new ones are ready to be launched. And that's the reason why the European Space Agency and the European Commission together have decided to move on with improved satellites, basically a second generation of satellites, which they call batch 4, because it's the 4th procurement lot that is initiated, and that is really a different kind of satellite, much more powerful, much bigger, because at the end of the day, what do you need from a satellite? You need a robust signal on the ground. This is what it really comes down to, and obviously the smaller the equipment on the ground gets, the receivers, the antennas, and so on, the better it is to have a powerful signal from space, so that you can really have microscopic Galileo receivers with tiny little antennas. And that's what we are really aiming for. I guess the benchmark for Europe now for the next step is the 3rd generation of GPS satellites that are now being implemented in the US. And so everybody looks here in Europe to be, of course, better than GPS 3 in terms of the core navigation signal. This is what we're all aiming to, and I think we're on a good way in achieving that. And as I said earlier, the 1st generation of Galileo made a big jump ahead the 1st generations of GPS, because GPS, not to forget, GPS is in operation since decades, and we are in operation since less than 2 years. So we started in December 16. And we have really, in terms of the quality of the signals, been very good. And experts say that the quality of the signals of Galileo is even better than GPS. So I think the infrastructure that Andreas Hammer was talking about that we need for optimizing mobility, optimizing traffic, of course, autonomous driving is a big challenge. Of course, we need very reliable signals everywhere. We need to have authentication of signals, that the signal that a device receives is the right signal. Because when you go to autonomous driving, of course, you're taking a different set of risks than if you go to people driving. People driving, you have a certain risk, but if you go to autonomous driving, you have other risks. Experts say in total it's less, risky, autonomous driving, because it might be possible to manage that in a safe way. But the requirements we see in the future navigation satellites will be more and more stringent, and that's obviously for the space community a big opportunity.
And how is your company OHB supporting mobility solution on Earth apart from Galileo?
Yeah, we are since many years, actually since the 90s, we are involved in what you at that time then called telematics. Now it's M2M. It's basically making sure that moving vehicles, moving parts are tracked and traced, and the status information are organized so that you get transparency about logistic processes. This is something we're doing since a long time. It's more and more optimized. It's not that much a space-related activity. At the end of the day, the application, the analytics is very important, but it uses space tools. So I wouldn't call these systems space systems because the majority of the value is on ground, is application-based, is software-based. But this is now a mature industry. You can basically, in every country of the world, you can buy these type of services. Many of those are based on communication link with terrestrials, but some of them are also in need of satellite communication. Most of the time, satellite is the backup channel if you go out of a certain area, simply for pricing reasons. We are part of that since a long time. It's not that well known because people always look at OHB as a satellite company, but we are longer than that. We are a telematics company actually. Our IPO in 2001 was based on this telematic business. If you go back to the old history, we only after that moved more and more into becoming a satellite company.
Thank you, Mr. Fuchs. Professor Ditters, we talk about future mobility and the role of space infrastructure in this context. What is the status today? How dependent is the daily traffic already today in the streets, in the air and on the oceans from satellites? How much support comes already now from space?
I mean, everyone knows there is no car delivered today without a navigation system. Everyone is requiring. I think it's important to say that we use these systems as daily tools today. So there is no doubt we need it. The problem we have is that we have to rely on robust systems. Robustness is just mentioned, is one of the key problems we have with navigation systems of today. So next generation of satellites have to be more robust, but also more precise. We have a lot of precision problems. And it's not GPS or Galileo or Beidou or all the other systems. They all built a system of more than 160 satellites up to now. And it's growing up, a growing number of these kind of satellites. And we use them all in our navigation system. So the more we have, the more precise we can navigate. But it's not only that. We also build up a new technology. Autonomous driving needs more precision. We have to rely on much better clocks in the future. We have to rely on the links between Earth and the satellites. They have to. It's not easy. When you can build up better clocks, but the better clocks are make only sense if the system, which transfers the time signal from ground to space and back, has the same kind of precision. So we need optical communications in the future as well. But there is more. I mean, DLR is not only active in space research and space technology, but we're also active in transport. So we do a lot of research and development in autonomous driving. And there is also expectations from that side. I mean, if we see these autonomous driving systems, the question is, are there the legal frameworks to run them really? Because, I mean, we cannot only ask for disruptive solutions in the space field and many others. The question is there free space for application on ground? I mean, there is a lot of discussion how autonomously cars can really drive. But I personally miss this framework. So what is demanded, what is required from our side in space with respect to disruptive technology needs disruptive solutions on ground as well. And this is mostly hindered by legal regulations and administrative problems. So I think we cannot take the toolbox of the 70s and 60s sometimes in administration and legal frameworks if we ask for always new technology in space and on ground. Yeah.
We come to the legal framework a little bit later.
Yeah. Okay.
I would like to know, DLR is one of the major research centers in Germany. On which ideas and projects you are working regarding to future mobility supported by space infrastructure? What is your favorite idea at this time?
There are many, but maybe I will mention the two most important. The two most important is that we stay away from the systems we have now, and it's just discussed with batch 4. We see the future of navigation systems in different systems. What we like to have is less clocks in space, so we rely on systems where we have exchange between the different satellites in the orbital planes based on optical communication, and have relay satellites transferring the time signals to the individual satellites. So this could make the system much more robust if you can store the time signal into the satellites. It's a completely different approach in the satellite constellation and technology for the future. This is one field where we have a lot of discussions, and the other field is technology. If we like to become more precise in GNSS systems, we have to go to quantum optics in the future and have to base communication as well as the sensing technique and the clock technology on satellites on pure quantum technology for the future. This is the only way to get more precise in these systems for the future. So this is the core part, maybe, or the core science we like to do in the future for these GNSS systems. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Dittos. Mr. Hammer, you want to answer straight away?
I just wanted to say that that we are going to see in the near coming future that all systems, whether we talk Earth observation, telecommunications, or navigations, we are going to have, of course, technological developments. DLR and we are working already on laser communication terminal, and that could be a solution in order to actually export the ground stations from ground into space, which is a new idea. If you look in the telecommunication area, we are moving currently more from broadcasting to broadbanding, because there is the incredible data hunger, which is increasing. And in Earth observation, we have more and more high reliable systems which actually are submitting their data without a delay, which is also based, by the way, by backbone solutions. So what I'm saying is, we are seeing now that technology is developing faster and faster. We are seeing, as Marco was saying, on the ground, that there are more ideas on applications, which is actually helping the infrastructure in space to develop faster, and vice versa. So we have now an incredible momentum in everything, together with the startups coming and the big companies like Airbus, for example, so that I see that we need to rethink sometimes the approaches we have used really a few decades back. And hopefully technology is helping on that. So what we shouldn't do is we shouldn't use our ideas which we had in the 90s, 60s, and 70s in order to approach the challenges what we are having. We should actually go back to zero and just start it from the beginning. This is at least true for regulatory things which we need to overthink. And that's true, of course, for air traffic management and also for the city planners. And I think the momentum we have currently all over the place, and just to have this, for example, this conference here on or this podium's discussion on this conference, it's helping because people and regulators and everybody is more open for change, and this is exactly what we need.
Yeah, maybe a question to all of you. What about the legal framework condition? Is there some homework to do for the politicians or for the industry? What do you think? Who wants to answer?
Yeah, if I may, and then I will hand over to him. You see, we have now, what are the big buzzwords? Of course, it's air taxis, autonomous driving, and over the past years, it's autonomous flying, drones, right? And over the past years already, so many people have worked on the fact that we need to have a traffic insertion, that's called traffic insertion, of drones into normal air traffic. Because what would you do if you just have to segregate an airspace and have drones flying in a segregated airspace and air traffic is flying in a separate one? Then it doesn't really help everybody. So if you talk now about delivering of parcels with drones, which is already an idea, if you talk about autonomous driving with air taxis, you need to have an answer of how to insert non-piloted vehicles in normal air traffic. And what we are seeing is this discussion is ongoing. It can't be done on a national base. It must be done actually at least European and international base. And this is a kind of appeal I would put to the politicians, that we need to ask the Ministry of Transport, whoever is in charge, to be more open for that. And not to come back, exactly like I said before, with some rules we established 40 years back.
Mr. Glocke?
I couldn't agree more. The challenge we had from the very beginning was not only the technical development of the volocopter, but definitely the regulatory and certification aspects. On the one hand, you have the certification of the vehicle, so that's going a fine way. IAC is very eager to certify. They support us a lot. But what we need in the future is a complete new ecosystem, and it's something that is not regulated today. So it's a complete nightmare for bureaucracy. So we are getting a lot of support from more and more politicians and also governments. But still, it's a process where we actually need every player in the industry. It's not something that Airbus could do alone, or Volocopter certainly not as a startup. Other companies. So here, everybody has to team together and explain to our politicians and to the authorities that this is the future and that we need regulation that really works out for us in future.
I only like to add one sentence. I mean, if we like to have development in technology and bring in autonomous traffic control, then of course technology development needs legal frameworks. Otherwise, you can forget all about standardization, and this kills all this kind of development. And I think this is what we need. Otherwise, we slow down development.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with what was said before on the panel. But of course, this is a complex process because it involves multiple interests. Of course, it involves the point of safety, but also environmental aspects, noise. So you have complex interests, and everything that is regulatory and involves the society at large will obviously be hotly debated. So I'm concerned that this regulatory aspect will slow down some of these technically potentially feasible ideas that we might see in other parts of the world, but in a congested country like Germany, in inner city situations, we might end up with having more strict regulation than others, but that's of course beyond our joint reach, and I think that we need to openly monitor these new ideas because they, of course, like every new technology, they offer potentials that should be evaluated. But again, it will be politically debated, and I just hope that there will be an open mindset that gives these new ideas a good chance.
Thank you. New legal conditions is certainly a topic of the future. It takes some years. How's the situation today, Mr. Glocke? Do you have enough testing grounds, testing sites where your volocopters can fly and be tested?
Not yet. We're working on an autonomous test field in Baden-Württemberg. Our state government has now indicated tremendous support for that, especially since Bavaria announced it some months ago. So there's a little bit of competition between the states in southern Germany. It's much easier in states like Singapore or Dubai, where all the authorities are working very closely together. And there we can start next year on test rounds. So we actually did this in Dubai last year already. So finally we got permission to do autonomous flying inside Dubai city after 4 months of testing in the desert. So the procedures are basically the same, but some states are obviously faster than others.
Thank you. Professor Dittes, how do you support SDLR companies like Volocopter in establishing future mobility solutions?
We have close cooperation to many, many companies. I mentioned TESAT. I can mention OHB as well. And I don't know whether we have cooperation with you from Volocopter so far, but I think it will come up. I'm only speaking for space research and space technology development now, but I think this is our desire to bring in all our research into these loops of technology, adaptation and application. And I think for us, it's a normal way of bringing up things that we work together with our partners in industry all over Europe and also internationally.
So you would say the cooperation between providers of new mobility systems for the future and the space industry and the research centers is good?
Yeah, it's good, but let me mention one point. If we go to space, space is relatively free. Okay, we discuss about legal frameworks also there, about control and registration and regulation in space. This will come up in the future, definitely. If we talk about thousands of satellites in fleets, this must come, this will come. But in space, we're relatively free. We can offer solutions for nearly every application. On the other side, if the signals come down, then of course the question starts, is this reliable enough to bring it into an automobile system, for example, autonomous system? So I give you an example. If we send down GPS signals, they're very, very weak. We talk about if your mobile receive a signal, it's roughly 10 to the minus 18 watt. It's a tiny number. It's really tiny. Can be disturbed very easily. And the question is how we can prove that the signal you get is really reliable enough. You rely on your mobile. It's that the mobile will tell you the right way all time. But if you fly a plane, it's not as easy. Because if this is disturbed, the signal, and you rely on a signal just before landing, then you can run in a very, very dangerous situation. So that's the problem now what we're facing, that we make this kind what we call threat analysis of signals. And you have to watch it all time, because it can happen by intention, but also by no intention. So they can be disturbed for a terroristic act or whatever. So this needs a very careful observation of the signal and all-time monitoring. And you have to tell the pilots and the drivers or who else is running the systems, whether they can rely on the system or not. And this is a major technological problem. And this, of course, has to be solved before we run into a real application as well. So this is a problem. So there are many, many ideas. We have also nice solutions so far, but of course it costs also money and so on. This is what I like to mention in addition. So it's easy to think about technological solution. On the other side, we also have to think about what we call threat analysis. Yeah.
Mr. Hammer, do you work on these problems too?
Yes, that's indeed something. We have an entity within Airbus who is working on trusted connectivity. It's a business which is called CAS within Airbus. They are working exactly on that. What you're seeing is that the whole population, society, everybody is more and more totally dependent on IT systems. Meaning, if you can't trust the information anymore, what is going to happen? You don't find your way. You're probably in a final approach in an aircraft, and you realize too late that it's not really the final approach. And I'm not talking even about bank accounts and all that, what is happening currently with cybercrime. But this is one of the biggest challenges I see in every single area. How can you trust the information you really get? And how do you do that? And I totally concur with what you're saying. This needs to be solved out, in particular because autonomous flying and driving is totally dependent on information, constant information, and whenever they get wrong ones, they are going to harm probably people. And that's also a hurdle I'm going to see in society. It's already discussed with drones, and to be honest, a city taxi, autonomous flying is nothing else than a drone. If you have a drone flying constantly overhead, you have to give the population time to adapt to these kind of things. Right now, we are just kind of surprised if we see these little toys flying around, but if it's a bigger one and there's nobody on board and all that, so you see, if something is happening, this is going to be a drawback like hell. So we need to ensure everything works, nobody gets harmed, regulations are there, information can be trusted. It's the whole ecosystem which has to work together. And then this is going to be the future, which is without alternative, as I see it.
So talking about threats, so the volocopter, for instance, can be piloted or remote controlled or flying autonomously. In Western countries, first choice is always to put a pilot in and give the pilot the responsibilities. There are other countries like China or Dubai, they don't want private persons in their airspace. So they obviously vote for autonomous flying or even remote control from a flight control center. In the moment you open the possibility for remote control, somebody can take it over. So that's also a threat. So the question is now, how much redundancy do you have in your system, in your GPS, in your camera systems, in your local navigation, to make sure that the vehicle actually knows what it's doing. So if one system is disturbed, you still have the data from the other ones, and then the computer has to decide which are the valid ones.
How long will it take, you think, until your volocopters fly over German cities? What do you think?
So actually, the volocopter is allowed to fly over German cities since 2.5 years because we have an ultralight permission to fly. But you mean in a regular way and so on. So we think that we might start test flights in 12 to 18 months in Germany, much earlier in other countries. I think that the regular business we have to wait for the IAC certification, so there won't be any commercial business without that certification. Until then, so we target 2.5, 3 years. Until then, we hope that we have the basic regulation to do so.
Today it is, I think, pretty expensive to build such a volocopter and to have it or not. How much will be the price?
We're not talking about the price of the vehicle anymore, since we want to establish the ecosystem and to offer actually a taxi. And the taxi, the flight price will be about 30% more than a normal taxi ride. So it's like a black car ride. The volocopter itself, and I guess the city areas as well, is very economically. The biggest pain point are definitely the batteries, because they are still very expensive, and they have, especially in an air vehicle, a very low life cycle. So this is the pain point in this, but the operating costs of a volocopter are next to nothing.
Sam, many people today work in big cities, and that's the place where the autonomous driving and autonomous flying will be first come true. But people live in the city, like to live or work in the city and live in the countryside maybe. How can these both areas can be connected in the future?
See, the idea, if you look at the range of the airborne taxis, it's okay. There are some who have a wider range, like for example Lilium. They're aiming at for 300 kilometers, but most of the systems which are currently tested on the market, they have a range of 50 kilometers. And that's exactly how a lot of people think there is the immediate future lying for us, because they are living on the countryside, and instead of sitting in a traffic jam, they are just climbing in a taxi and fly to the city. That should be the normal way, the normal day, right? And as he was saying, it's not planned that it's very expensive. It's actually planned that you pay for a kilometer just 2 times as you pay for a normal taxi on the ground, 2 to 3 times. That's at least targeted, and then it's going to be attractive. So this means that cities and bigger cities are actually have, if you take a 50 kilometers range, That's quite a lot, because then you can actually, how to say, deconflict and decongest cities, big cities already right now, because people are more and more incentivized to live on the countryside and just to work in cities. So the thing is only that that's going to be a big change, because right now it's different. That's why we have, in Airbus, we have made a comparison what kind of countries are more open to this approach than others. And as he is saying, Germany is not on the first place. It's Dubai. That's why he was flying in Dubai and other cities which are totally open, because they are trying to plan their cities as a real smart city. This is going to change a lot. It's actually changing also what we have in Germany, the tram, the U-Bahn system and everything, because these city taxis or air taxis have to be incorporated into the normal, how is it called, Nahverkehrssystem, public transportation systems. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't help the cities. So, but this is the ultimate goal. If you see a normal life in the future, let's say in 10 years from now, you have a nice, cheaper little house with garden. It's cheaper because it's far away, 50 kilometers, and you climb in your taxi, you fly to work, and in the evening back, and you haven't paid a lot. That's exactly the idea.
Right. Mr. Fuchs, would you step into a volocopter and fly with it without pilot?
Yeah, I think I would give it a try. I mean, obviously it's now new and you don't want to be one of the first, but when you realize that it is becoming a robust system, of course it's changing the world. What we just heard is a totally different world, but if you go back 50 years ago, the world was also different. I mean, commuting the way we know it now was not the all-day life scenario for people 50, 60, 70 years ago. We all have lived through years witnessing this change, that suburbs have been created far out of the cities. And again, I'm not so sure that Germany will be leading this process, because I think the balance of interest in decision making here are a little bit more, I would say, conservative than elsewhere. And of course, the reality, I'm sure, will be first that we will see no-fly zones. We will have debates about noise. We will have debates about safety and security, rightfully. But with every trend you see, when others are doing it, later on you will follow. So we will not be a leader, but we will be a follower, because we will meet more and more people coming from places where this is already taking place and where this is a normal day life. And obviously then there will be adaptation of this. I think the technical challenges are in a good way. The economic question is obviously open there. What does it cost? Does it make sense? Is it useful? And so on and so on. But again, I think it's our role to make sure that these things robustly, safely work, and they, of course, also should have a better influence on the climate and on the environment in total. And I think that is not that difficult, because if you see how much time people waste in traffic jams, how much time people waste in commuting, how much pollution is created in day-to-day traffic, moving into the big cities, moving out of the big cities, hundreds of millions of people every day. Of course you can optimize. I mean, you can also optimize the existing systems. Obviously, you can probably use the public transportation system more efficiently, and everybody tries to optimize that. Obviously, you can use the roads more efficiently if you do certain things. Yes, that will all be part of the solution. Of course, the vehicles will change. I mean, we are now witnessing the change from combustion to electric vehicles. And nobody really, I think, of us 10 years ago would have really believed it. We all knew 10 years ago that, of course, technically, you can build electric cars. This was possible since, I don't know, since how long? I don't know, many years, many decades. It's not a technical evolution, what we see now happening with electric mobility. it's just market maturity that is happening. And the acceptance is different because now you see electric vehicles coming at the heart of mobility. Nice cars, fancy cars, sport cars. It used to be, years ago, it used to be, I don't know, golf carts or whatever, hospital transportation, whatever. It was a different view. So I think we will see this happening, and it's I think, overall a good thing.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for the discussion so far. We want to give the audience the chance to ask questions. Are there questions? Please raise your hand. I see one hand there and one hand there. Please wait for the microphone.
Hello, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I'm Marius from France. And I want to know how much does it cost to produce one volocopter?
We didn't get it. Please
It's hard to understand on stage.
How much is a volocopter?
The price?
Yeah.
At the moment, we don't give price tags on the volocopter. The plan is actually to go quite soon in mid-20s in production rates of 10,000 of volocopters. That's one of the reasons why we actually partner with automotive companies like Daimler, because if you look at aircraft industry, 10,000 planes of one type is you won't find anywhere, but it's quite usual for the car industry. I will be beaten up by my public relation people, but I guess the price point for the volocopter then will be around 70,000 euro.
Okay, next question. There, behind, in the middle.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. My name's Alan from Scotland. I was just wondering about, obviously there's huge changes coming in transportation with the volocopter, etc. What is your outreach for the public perception of adoption of these new technologies? It's always going to be a change for cities. How are you going to encourage the public to accept these changes?
By doing it slowly, step by step. So you would definitely start with unmanned flights for a while from A to B, then take pilots on it, then start with passengers, and then slowly increase into other routes. So people have to get used to it. And we have made some questionnaires out there, and wherever we ask, about 50% of the people would immediately climb into a volocopter and would love to fly it, which on the other hand means 50% won't.
Maybe. Just to add on my side, when you look at the autonomous driving, and everybody here probably believes that it's coming, one of the major arguments is that it's actually increasing safety and security, that it reduces by more than 90% the accidents and the life losses you have every single day on the streets. The thing is, whenever something is happening with the autonomous car right now, of course, press is jumping onto it and makes a story out of it, which is understandable. But at the same second, normal accidents happen with normal cars. So one of the biggest arguments is actually that you increase the safety and security, which is, by the way, also true in when you fly. When you would pilot an air taxi. See, I was just a private pilot in my life. There is no single accident which was connected to a technological failure, but a 100% connection to a pilot's failure whenever there was an accident. This you have to understand. And that's going to be, of course, an argument for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Hammer. You want to answer too, or not? So, any more questions? Last chance, here in front.
Thanks. Hi, Kanterian. Family Business Magazine. I would like to know if you're looking for more testing grounds.
Yeah, we both do. At the moment, Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg are both trying to give us some sandboxes to test. Nevertheless, we are testing abroad too.
So also outside of Germany?
Yes, yes, we do.
Then we'll come up with an idea.
Sorry?
I will let you, I have an idea.
Okay. So we have still 2 minutes, another 2 minutes. Any questions? I don't see any hands. Okay. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Thank you for your contributions to the discussion. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind attention, and have a nice day at the Congress.